Arguably, if you take inflation into consideration, the number one box office movie of all time, I believe, is still Gone with the Wind, if I'm not mistaken. I think it is. Certainly one of the most celebrated films of all time, one of the most memorable, and certainly one of the most talked about films of all time. Well, HBO Max has just made the decision to pull Gone with the Wind off of its service temporarily. Now, the film is, when it comes to, the discussions going on in our society right now about racial issues and things like that, Gone with the Wind certainly is, I think we would all agree, problematic to some degree. But the question becomes, what do we do with it? Now, what they have said on HBO Max was, their basic statement was that we are taking this movie off of our platform for now, but it will be coming back. We just want to make it come back with a discussion attached to it about the issues going on at the time. Now, actually, there's an interesting little commentary about this, if I can find it here. Give me 1 second to see if I can pull this up. Yes, this came to us from CNN, who talked about what HBO said about it. They said a spokesperson for HBO Max told CNN Business that Gone with the Wind is a product of its time and depicts some of the ethnic and racial prejudices that have unfortunately been commonplace in American society. These racist depictions were wrong then and are wrong today, and we feel that to keep the title up without an explanation or a denouncement of those depictions would be irresponsible. The spokesperson added that when the film returns to HBO Max, it will return with a discussion of its historical context and a denouncement of those very depictions, and will be presented as it was originally created. So the movie's not going to be edited. They're not going to edit the movie. It will be presented as it was originally created, because to do so otherwise would be the same as claiming that these prejudices never existed. It would be the same to claim that these prejudices never existed. I got to tell you, I don't mind this. I don't mind the idea, because I remember, Rob, we were talking, I can't remember if it was Song of the South or Dumbo, or we were talking about one of those other movies. And I remember you pointing out at the time, it's like, hey, to keep these movies intact, but remember one of the movies put a disclaimer in front of it, say, listen, this movie depicts some things. And, you were talking about that and about how appropriate that was. And I think the idea of, an HBO Max or any streaming service doing something to say, hey, we do want to have something attached to this, whether it's an opening title screen or whether it's an opening 5-minute discussion between a couple of people about the issue that you can skip or not, or something like that. I think there's a key thing here. I think a lot of people are getting mad at the idea that they're pulling it, but I think they're missing two key parts. Number one, they're already saying they're going to put it back on. And number two, they're saying when they put it back on, they're not editing it. It is going to be as the original cut of the film, because in their words, to do so otherwise would be the same as claiming that these prejudices never existed. So I got to say, as I look at this situation, Rob, I don't take a lot of issue with this. I don't think there's anything wrong with attaching some kind of disclaimer, discussion, phrasing it in the sense of the historical context of it. They're not editing the film, which, by the way, if it's their movie, I wouldn't have even had that big of a problem personally if they decided to do some edits, but I think it's preferable that they don't. And so they're not doing that. So I just think those two big factors, that it is coming back and they're not going to edit the film, are things people have to keep in mind before they get terribly upset about it. One of the other interesting things, though, Rob, is that all this is coming up today on June the 10th. June the 10th just so happens to be the birthday of one of the stars of Gone with the Wind, Hattie McDaniel. And Hattie McDaniel played, how did they pronounce it? Mammy in the film. Hattie McDaniel was in that movie, and she played the role. But here's the key thing about that. She became the first African-American actress to be nominated for and win an Academy Award. She actually won the Academy Award that year. And listen, you have to understand what a big deal that would have been at the time. I mean, we made a big deal out of it, not many years ago when Denzel and Halle Berry both won their Academy Awards. But like, you go back to the Academy Awards in 1940, the first time ever an African-American actress won. But it's also a reminder for us. This isn't back during the Roman Colosseum days. This was at the Academy Awards, okay? This is history, but it ain't that long ago. Hattie McDaniel, who won the Academy Award, there had to be a fight to even let her in the building. A venue where the Oscars were being held had a no blacks allowed rule. And they actually had to fight to get her allowed into the building. And then once they did let her in the building, she was not allowed to sit with her white castmates at the thing. Not because her castmates didn't want her, but because the facility wouldn't let her in. And when they did, fine. But she's got to sit at a table at the back. It was the Oscars version of a Rosa Parks situation. They made her sit at the back. And yet she won the Academy Award for that. And it is her birthday today, just by the way. It is her 125th birthday today. She is obviously no longer with us, but it would have been her 125th birthday today. Anyway, fascinating stuff with all that and the days and the times that all these are kind of lining up. Anyway, Rob, you hear this story about they're pulling it, they're going to put it back, they're going to attach a disclaimer or discussion of some sorts, they're not going to edit the film. You look at this all in context. What's your responses and what's your initial feelings to it?
I think that's the right thing to do. You know, we can't pretend that history and our culture didn't exist and has not been in a constant state of evolution. Things change, attitudes change. We have to grow and evolve as individuals and as a society. And I think that trying to get rid of, like, from our perspective, if we're looking back at a movie that came out in 1939, that you're going to go back and say, we have to get rid of that movie because we think in a different way. We've evolved since 1939 is incredibly problematic. The idea that history itself is going to be destroyed because we don't like it. We might as well erase everything that happened before, I don't know, 10 years ago. And even the last 10 years are very questionable. Sometimes people's history yesterday isn't worth preserving, but it all is worth preserving because we learn from it. And especially, look, in cinema history, Gone with the Wind is a staggering achievement from a filmmaking perspective. But I've always looked at this movie as if you haven't seen Gone with the Wind, it's obviously set in the antebellum South, and it's this idealized version of this beautiful place with no problems, and these people at the beginning, like, we're going to war against the North, and they're all happy about it. Let's go. And what the movie then does is show it basically, as writer David Gerrold said, it is a savage evisceration of their entire way of life. Remember, they were committing treason against the Union. They were fighting for the economic realities of they wanted to keep people enslaved, and the whole way of life gets destroyed. The burning of Atlanta. There are scenes when there are thousands of casualties. All these young boys that were so eager to fight their own brothers in the North all get just destroyed. And then also it's a melodrama too about basically a selfish woman that loses everything. I mean, this is not some happy-go-lucky depiction. I mean, this is a movie that deals with the horrors of all of it ultimately and the folly of man. And I think it's a movie that's worth seeing that, yes, has very problematic depictions, but it's also what is the movie really about? And I think it basically shows that, yes, the Southern way of life, the antebellum South, was something that perhaps deserved to be destroyed. And I think absolutely it did, which is why the Civil War was fought and why the North prevailed. And yet within that, you've also got this crazy melodramatic love story. And that's why people like this story ultimately, I think, because it is a melodrama. First and foremost, it's basically about Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara. You could have set this story anywhere if you wanted to, but really, I think the movie itself is a savage. It's savage about how it is not a fan of the South. Nor is it Margaret Mitchell might have been who wrote the novel. But I think, as much as they could slip in it's a pretty harsh depiction of a way of life that needed to go away.
You know, it
It needed to go away.
Did you ever see the Jason Reitman film "Thank You for Smoking"?
Yeah.
See, it reminds me a bit of that, because for those of you who may not have seen it, and it starred Two-Face, Eckhart.
Aaron Eckhart.
Aaron Eckhart. It starred Aaron Eckhart. It's a great movie. If you have not seen it, it's fantastic. But, you know, I don't know if it was allegorical. It kind of feels allegorical today. But at the end of it, you know, they had the anti-smoking movement. And it turns out, like, the message of the movie is smoking is not good. Smoking is not good.
Right.
But also within it, you know, I think it was, I can't remember if it was William H. Macy who was in the movie. But at the end, William H. Macy, who's this anti-smoking guy, is like now trying to get Hollywood to go back to classic movies and take out scenes of smoking, you know, and get all the scenes of smoking out because it's a bad example. But I think, you know, it's the old adage, Rob. I think those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. And I think, you know, I gotta say, I think what HBO Max's response here is a fair, balanced, and reasonable response. We're going to take it down for now. We're going to develop a discussion disclaimer to go with it, and then we are going to return it back up unedited with disclaimers about the reality of what the context this movie was made in, and that it has certain depictions that were accepted at the time and shouldn't have been, and things like that. I got to say, I don't see anything particularly wrong with what they're doing here when you keep in mind that it is temporary and they're not going to edit the film. So question is for you guys. Oh, Rob, what were you going to say there?
Well, you know, what I was going to say is that so much of history is problematic when you look back upon it. The way, I mean, go back far enough, I think every group of people at some point on this planet, as we evolved and expanded across the planet, was hated by another group of people. There has been so much injustice and so much horror and so much just cruelty. Nobody is better at being more cruel to their fellow human beings than other human beings are. And if we were to get rid of all of those depictions of that, we are really doing ourselves a disservice. We have to remember who we were and what we were if we're ever going to be better. And isn't that what life is about? To improve ourselves and improve our lot in life and be better than we were yesterday?
All right, guys. Question is for you. What do you think? Now, of course, keeping in mind those two things, it's going to be back. It's going to be unedited. What do you think about HBO Max's moves right now? Like it, don't like it, kind of in the middle of it? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right, guys.